Hi, this is Little Dwarf playing games while rambling incoherently into a microphone. Why? Well, just because I can, and I continue with The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings, modded. Now, the entirety of this episode will be nothing but me reading the codex and various journal-related entries. So, if you're not interested in that, you can just skip it. There will be no gameplay in this episode. Gameplay will resume from the next one. So let's get to it because there's like a shit ton of it. First, let me start with the monster descriptions. So, necrophages. Given that they are necrophages, rotfiends feed on carrion and human corpses, though this does not mean that they do not attack the living. They appear on the battlefields near cities afflicted by plague or around villages touched by famine. See a rotfiend and you can be sure that there are many more in the area. They appear of a sudden and disappear even more quickly if threatened, so exterminating them is difficult. Trapping rotfiends make little to no sense. Instead, they are best dealt with by cutting off their food supply, that is, burning all of the corpses in the area. Corpses must be incinerated rather than buried, for rotfiends are avid and skillful diggers. Without sustenance, the beasts will leave in search of new feeding grounds. Trolls. Trolls are primitive, true, but they are counted among sapient creatures. They can speak our tongue, though not very colorfully. They mate in pairs for life, and despite what the spiteful would say, they have feelings, even though they express them unceremoniously. All trolls share fondness of building and alcohol. They combine those passions by erecting bridges and drinking away the money gained from collecting tolls. Thus originated the saying, straight like a troll bridge when something is twisted, and trolling it a day when construction workers make a break for quote-unquote lunch. If a troll spots an opponent from a distance, he will try to crush them by throwing a huge rock. Trolls are surprisingly accurate while throwing missiles, and their thick skin provides them with ample protection from arrows, so exchanging fire with them always ends in the troll's victory. The beast must be reached as fast as possible and slaughtered with strong blows. They are sluggish, so a swordsman evades first a thrown rock, then a rock-heavy fist. He has a chance of survival. One should not take risks, however, and if possible reach an understanding with the monster. Trolls are huge beings, so knocking them down or unbalancing them in combat is highly unlikely. Their ability to regenerate is legendary and means that they do not need to fear wounds or oils increasing bleeding. However, their fast metabolism has a darker side. Since the monsters are very susceptible to venoms, they swiftly reach all recesses of the trollish body. The Arahi. The Arahase are large, slow, and protected by durable armor. Their carapace, as the Witchers call their armor, is especially tough in the front, so it's much easier to wound the creature from the side or from the back. The Arahase's charge make an excellent occasion for that, it should be, or something. It seems like there's a word missing. The Arahase's charges make an excellent occasion for that. One has to evade the charge at all costs by stepping out of the beast's way, and then make one's blow. Without doubt, it's best to use the strong style then. The Arahase has no fear of poison, and not much fear of fire. Its primitive nervous system barely reacts to wounds, and its incredible vitality allows it to take even great wounds. The beast will heal after the fight anyway, all while digesting its prey. After all is said and done, the Arahase is a bug, so one's blade should be coated with the insectoid oil before fighting it. The monster's susceptibility to this blade coating is probably its sole weakness. The beast can easily shrug off all of the other Witcher tricks, so common poisons and signs are to no use, not to mention attempts to knock the Colossus down. The Endragas. These monsters, like arachnids, hatch from an egg. Impregnated queens lay eggs in cocoons, which hang from trees in areas known as nests. The lesser creatures zealously guard their queens, as colonies depend on them for survival. The queens themselves remain hidden, caring little for what happens to other adult specimens. However, when their nest is threatened, they emerge swiftly and fight ferociously. Thus, to exterminate an Endraga colony, one must set fire to the cocoons to lure out and kill the queen. When fighting an Endraga, use the strong style and then target the beast's abdomen when the armor is weakest. Trusting in the toughness of their armor, the creatures often willingly take blows, only to respond with a sudden counterattack that can be deadly if not evaded or blocked. Endragas can bleed to death if hit with a blade coated with an appropriate oil. They are also susceptible to all Witcher's signs. The monster can be easily tripped up, knocked over, or immobilized by a trap. However, the Endraga's peculiar metabolism makes it immune to poison. Neckers. When Neckers venture out as a war or hunting party, they are led by chieftains. These are larger and mark their faces with red clay. Chieftains give orders, turning a wild band into an organized unit, thus they should be eliminated first. The Neckers' basic tactic is to strike en masse. They burrow from beneath the ground and swarm upon their prey. Though primitive, this tactic is surprisingly effective. One must be ready to repel many foes at once. The fast style is best suited to that. As with other agile creatures, running from the Neckers is not the best idea, for the monster will catch up with their prey and swiftly kill it with multiple hits of their claws. Witchers can use their full range of skills and techniques when fighting Neckers. Signs, bombs, poisons and oils that augment bleeding are all extremely effective against the beasts. Necker nests are best destroyed with a grapeshot bomb. Wraiths. The wraiths are always connected to the sites of their demise. They may protect their former homes, or they may seek vengeance. One may find small groups of the wandering damned in crypts or catacombs or on the battlefields. It is not true that they only appear at night. I can confirm, however, that one cannot communicate with them, and that they do not have fear of man or monster. Wraiths hover just above the ground, so they move very swiftly. One should strike at them strongly and make ample use of signs. As immaterial beings, they can appear and disappear at will. If the Witcher swings his sword too slowly, giving the ghosts time to react, he might find himself striking nothing but air, and then sends a quick riposte on his back. Wraiths do not bleed, and common poisons do not harm them. They are, however, susceptible to fire and, of course, to silver. The best means of fighting a wraith is so-called spectre oil, which should be used to coat a silver blade. Now, this is straight up a lie. You can talk to specters. I literally did. It's just that not all of them want to talk, but, I've met that Nilfgaardian's ghost, and we literally struck a deal. Dragons. The legends are true. Dragons like to gather hordes and have a voracious appetite that they satiate by eating all the living creatures with no exceptions. Like cats, they like to lounge in the places of power. They nap there, drawing energy. But nobody knows what they use the energy for. There are 5 species of these great worms: white, black, red, green, and rock. Golden dragons, extremely intelligent, gifted with the ability to assume the shape of any creature, are of course a fairy tale for little children. Dragons are smart indeed, but they cannot speak, much less polymorph. The best tactic when meeting a dragon is to pray to all the gods with no exceptions. Atheists should run, and thus can extend their lives for a few heartbeats. It must be stressed that any of those choices would end in death when made by an amateur. One fighting a dragon should always watch for its fire above all else. The breath is lethal, momentarily ending the fight. The worms can also fly and are excellent at maneuvering, so they use their advantage of altitude in combat. A witcher should climb high buildings to surprise the reptile flying by and use walls as protection. The beast's jaws are even worse than its paws. They bring instant death. Dragons, like cats, like to toy with their prey, so sometimes they lift it to the air and they drop it from height when they are bored. Dragons are immune to poisons, unworried by oils which increase breathing, and unaffected by traps or bombs. One would be hard-pressed to find a soul brave enough to drop a dragon, unless it had been hacked to pieces with an axe first, and I wish such an outcome of the battle to all the dragon slayers with all my heart. Now, again, this is straight up lies, because golden dragons obviously do exist, and they can literally polymorph. Borg Trijaktos or Villain Tretemirth in the book was a golden dragon, and he could shapeshift into a human and had philosophical discussions with Geralt. So, yeah. Drowners. When monsters are really crappy, ganging up makes them happy. Drowners are not the mightiest of beasts in the world, so they hunt in groups in accordance with the above saying. They are surprisingly fast on land, but are a threat only to fishermen and washerwomen. They can best a witcher only if he is drunk or in love. Sometimes, however, a more robust specimen is found among the drowners. It's called the drowned dead and can command an entire band. Thus it's best to eliminate it first. One could say that if drowners chatted among themselves, Geralt would be highly esteemed among them after his exploits in Vizima. Yet drowners do not chat. They are dumb like a left shoe and good. Fast style should be used when fighting them, and one must spin swiftly before they flee from a witcher's blade. Enough said. As they are already dead, drowners do not fear poisons, and even large loss of blood makes no impression on them. To end the list of monsters' strong points, however, this ends the list of the monster's strong points, however, as the rest of the Witcher's arsenal is extremely effective against them. Thus, the drowners can be killed with fire, immobilized with traps, knocked over, and above all else, sliced and diced until slime spills from their ears. Alright, so that's all of the monster entries from the Knowledge tab. So let's get to locations. Lavalette Castle. During my travels, I have visited the dynastic abode of the Lavalette family several years. Anyone who considers Vizima an impressive city is unlikely to have seen the ancestral citadel of the Lavalettes. The immensity of the fortress is simply breathtaking, to the extent calling it a mere castle is either a gross inaccuracy or a jest. Expanded over generations, the walled town boasts the greatest fortifications in Temeria, and perhaps in all of the northern kingdoms. The citadel is located near the strategically important White Bridge, which connects the banks of the Pontar. It commands the entire area, including nearby trade routes and the river crossing. No wonder that the rebellion of the Lavalettes disturbed Foltest's sleep. The dungeons of the Lavalette Castle. During one of my visits to the Lavalette's family abode, when I had the pleasure of meeting the old baron's niece, a charming creature but 16 springs old, my host, clearly proud of her land and holdings, offered to show me around the keep's expansive and varied cellars. When he entertained me with conversation and anecdotes on various subjects, including the rather unique system of penalties designed for seducers of the underaged, I got a thorough tour of the dungeon beneath the Lavalette Castle. The guards were exceptionally polite and seemed to have an unerring sense of direction within the labyrinthine network of vestibules, cells, and winding corridors. I imagined that without their help, it would be easy to lose one's way here, wandering around for hours, unable to find an exit. I would not envy a soul imprisoned here. Flotsam. A river trading post lies along the upper course of the Pontar, among inaccessible forests in the valley that bears the river's name. Numerous trade routes meet here, and the Temerian-Edirne border is located nearby. Land travel in the region was arduous and dangerous, for the Scoia'tael units prowled the woods. However, as they say, elves like cats are shy of water, so most travelers and merchants chose to sail the river. Flat-bottomed barges, punts, scows, and even seagoing cogs visited the harbor, ferrying goods between Edirne, Kedwen, Temeria, Redania, and Cidaris on the seashore. No wonder then that this ostensibly small outpost was of vital economic importance. He who controlled it drew immense profits from trade. At the start of our story, Flotsam belonged to Temeria, and its small garrison was tasked with enforcing the law and providing protection from river pirates, Scoia'tael units, and monsters inhabiting the surrounding forest. Flotsam's brothel is one of the only two noteworthy attractions available to visitors and locals, yet unlike the scaffold, the bordello kept regular hours, offered a regular repertoire, and had a regular staff. Lobinden. This small settlement, nestled against the walls of the trading post, was supposedly founded long ago by Edirnan settlers. Even if true, this is of little consequence. Though the village was a complete backwater compared to the provincial outpost, Lobinden and Flotsam depended on each other because most of the area's fishermen, boat builders, tar makers, and hunters inhabited the settlement, providing products and services which no frontier community could live without. Elves and dwarves made up a large share of Lobinden's population. Tensions between them and the local humans were lower than in the trading post proper, as they were all united in their daily labors. The prison barge. The barge moored in Flotsam's harbor was used as a floating prison for the captured Scoia'tael and those accused of collaborating with the guerrillas. In unusually cramped and squalid conditions, the prisoners awaited transport to their final place of imprisonment, and then interrogation and the inevitable news. Flotsam Forest. The wilderness surrounding Flotsam was a thick, impassable wood where inexperienced travelers could easily lose their way and fall victim to wild beasts, or even more probable, elven arrows. A rarely used, thickly overgrown route led to Edirn, but given the forest's dangers, most travelers prefer to journey by river. A ruined bridge. The stone bridge on the road to Edirn had certainly seen better times. The local troll had been renovating and maintaining it, but this unusual toll collector had succumbed to alcoholism, leaving the bridge to fall into ruin. The altar of Veiopates. The forested wilderness lining the banks of the Pontar conceals many secrets, among them an altar dedicated to an ancient deity named Veiopates, nestled deep into the forest glade. The spot is well hidden from prying eyes, and the dangers of the wood discourage those who would seek it frivolously. Geralt, however, had no fear of monsters, and good reason to visit the mysterious site. In Charon's lair. The monster's lair was located near a small shoal by the ancient ruins of an elven bridge. Wrecked riverboats, heaps of algae, and the stench of rotting flesh unmistakably identified the spot to which the Charon had taken a liking. That, at least, is how it was described to me, for I was in no hurry to risk an expedition through the forest, only to tease the cranky old man in his den. When the wind blew from the ruined bridge, one could smell for oneself that there was little exaggeration in the tales of the Charon's aromatic presence. It stank so bad my eyes watered. Ruined elven baths. The inhabitants of Flotsam and its surroundings describe the nearby elven ruins in less than flattering terms. They mostly limit themselves to a heap of stones, my lord. Don't be going there alone, or a necker will catch you, and other similar phrases. I learned more when I bought Cedric a drink, where bindweed and briar entwined and splintered marble, buildings of captivating beauty had once stood. Today only the ruins of the baths and elven statues remain, testifying to the past splendor of this place. Characters. Marie-Louisa Lavalette. I had chanced to visit the court of the Lavalettes on several occasions in the past. Invariably, I was greeted and received in a manner befitting my fame and talent. Baroness Marie-Louisa was a very comely lady, her beauty having fully blossomed, her dark hair, her lips sensuous. As with many women married to markedly old men, rumors about her were plentiful, among them one claiming that she had a love affair with the King Foltest himself, and that the monarch had fathered her younger children. Triss Merigold. I have known the sorceress Triss Merigold for a long time, for she is one of Geralt's closest friends. The young, pretty, talented, auburn-haired mage from Maribor hardly reminded me of the giggling flapper of the years past. Her knowledge, abilities, and loyalty had brought her far. A hero from Soden, known as the 14th of the Hill, for she was mistakenly counted as the 14th mage to die in the battle. She sat on the royal council of King Foltest of Temeria, and though they say a monarch's favor is uncertain, for the king has once expelled all mages from Temeria, Triss has managed to gain Foltest's trust. As regards to the Witcher, anyone who was witness to Triss's friendship with Geralt, anyone who saw them together, would easily confirm that these two had much in common, and it is common knowledge that an old flame never dies. For these reasons, after Foltest's death, the sorceress decided that she would help the Witcher most by staying at his side, and not heeding her threatened position at court. She harnessed all her strength and powers to helping Geralt, whom she still had feelings to. I was not there at the time, but I've heard tales of the show of power Triss put on at the beach near Flotsam. Though she was weakened and barely conscious, the sorceress managed to sustain a magical barrier, and the three survived the scoia'tael arrows thanks to her. Nobody was surprised that Triss knew Sheila de Tancriville. A more attentive observer would certainly have noticed a chill in their greetings, as well as Triss's evident dislike for the elder colleague. The sorceress's greatest desire was to be the one and only woman in Geralt's life, and to forget all the troubles and dangers they had recently experienced. Geralt was close to agreeing to her proposal, yet he knew that it would be impossible to lead a quiet life until he could clear his name. His decision saddened Triss, but the sorceress understood. Triss was kidnapped by Leto. Geralt and I feared what he might have done to her. Believe me, it was eating me alive, making rest impossible. Searching Sheila's quarters and talking to her neighbor brought more questions than answers. It appears that Triss had known the woman she talked to, but the fragments of the conversation recounted to us remained mysterious. Now, it's interesting that the Dandelion in this journal entry phrases it as Geralt wanting to be with Triss, but not, but feeling like he can't because of other obligations. Whereas I think it's a detriment to like his character described in the books. Like I kind of feel she is abusing him by refraining from pointing out how important Yennefer used to be in his life, and I borderline feel like I, as the player, am abusing the established character of Geralt, because he clearly he loves Yennefer like, you know, to death, literally, which I don't entirely get. I don't very much like Yennefer as a character, like as a person. Let me rephrase that. I don't like her as a person, although I quite like her as a character in the book. So I don't entirely get what it is exactly that Geralt loves about her so much. But you know, such things are often unconstrained by such frivolous matters as logic. Geralt of Rivia, behold our hero, subjected to mutations and rigorous sword and sorcery training as a child. He has become a superhuman monster slayer. Always penniless and often disdained by those he protects, he wanders the world seeking for work. Fate has little mercy for him, piling obstacles in his way, yet he trudges on. He is more scrupulous than a beggaring bum has fleas. Doubts hunt him even when a band of ruffians, knives drawn, approaches him on a highway. Is he a good man? I do not think so. Does he try to maintain his humanity? I believe he does. You must know that Geralt of Rivia died once already, or at least everyone thought him dead. During a massacre in Rivia, he sought to defend non-humans and fell to overwhelming odds. Placed in a boat, he floated into the mist, into a realm where he finally found peace. Not for long, because of the forces mentioned later, Geralt returned just in time to defend the Witcher's ancient home fortress, and then embarked on a mission to recover the secrets stolen from it. Along the way, he took part in a scoia'tael uprising, shattered a powerful criminal organization, and killed the Grand Master of the Order of the Flaming Rose. All the while, his fame as a lover grew. Well, that's Geralt for you. As if that wasn't enough, He then foiled an attempted assassination of King Foltest of Temeria and became one of the monarch's most trusted men. Now, I think it's a pretty sort of rough and sort of concise assessment to just say, is Geralt a good man? I don't think so. I personally would lean towards the opposite answer. I definitely think, it's very difficult to answer any such question about anyone with like absolute certainty, because first you would have to, philosophers have argued for thousands of years, what does it even mean to be a good person? And then once you sort of decide on that, you have to contend with the fact that no one, even the most virtuous of people, are not virtuous 100% of the time. So what is the threshold for still being a good person versus not? But generally, I would say, in my mind, in my understanding of morality, Geralt definitely has the markings of a good person. He has, a very well developed conscience. He has many times throughout the book demonstrated that he's willing to, suffer personal injury and loss to defend people who cannot defend themselves, or who need protection, or who are unjustly persecuted, ending with the very fact that killed him, which was basically he was trying to protect his friends and generally an oppressed community from a bunch of murderous racists, which he had no stake in that, other than he felt it was a right thing to do, because he could have just grabbed just grabbed Dandelion and just fled, but he decided to stay and actually defend the non-humans of Rivia. So I definitely think he leans more towards being a good person than not, but what do I know? King Foltest. In retrospect, His Royal Majesty King Foltest was certainly an exceptional persona when compared to the other crowned heads of the time. This King of Temeria, Prince of Sodden, Sovereign of Pontar and Mahakam, and Senior Protector of Bruges, Angren, Riverdale and Elander, was a firm and decisive ruler, as I suppose one should expect from someone so abundantly titled. He was the kind of man who, when hit, made a sound suggesting he was forged of steel and not molded of bird dung. Being unmarried, he led a rather casual private life. In his youth, while still a prince, Foltest strove to demonstrate that he was capable of what he was capable of, and he proved capable of much. The love affair he had with his own sister, by whom he fathered his eldest daughter Ada, is widely known as is his later affection for the Baroness Marie-Louisa Lavalette. Both relationships bore heavy consequences, so to speak, and in both instances Geralt found himself stuck in the middle of the resulting mess. Foltest most certainly still harbored feelings for his former lover, and decided to save the children that were the fruit of this affair. He feared they would otherwise become trump cards in a game of politics, tools of intrigue. Once Foltest made his decision, no one and nothing could stand in his way. The deaths of the great and powerful of this world do not always befit their lives. The blow was so unexpected that even the Witcher failed to react in time. A dagger's blade ran across the throat of Foltest, the ruler of Temeria, cleanly slitting it, and his blood flowed onto the floor of the temple solar. Thus died one of the most powerful kings in the north, at the hands of an assassin in the garb of a monk. Shani. Some of you surely have heard rumors about the relationship that bloomed between the young medic Shani and Geralt. I hasten to inform you that they are all true. I consider Shani a friend, both true and old. We go back to the days when I lectured minstrelsy at the Oxenford University, and I was the one to introduce her to the Witcher. Upon Geralt's return to the living, they were reunited in Vizima, where the red-haired medic competed with Triss Merigold for Geralt's heart. She emerged victorious from this rivalry. The flame of their romance blazed bright, but it burned out quickly. Though a very young woman, Shani proved more mature than the Witcher, who had always found relationships puzzling and difficult. Geralt would dodge his obligations towards her, preferring instead to pursue missions King Foltest assigned him. The medic quickly realized that this flower would yield no bread. She had a serious conversation with the Witcher, and they parted amicably. Shani accepted an offer to teach at Oxenford and left for that city, whereas Geralt followed Foltest to the lands of the Lavalettes. After splitting with Shani, the Witcher needed comforting and quickly found solace in Triss Merigold's arms. Now, I am pretty peeved about this, because first of all, this seems pretty out of character for Geralt. He was never really into politics or like political affairs or, matters of state. He got thrust into those positions by being intermixed with them via his personal connections. But I failed to see how the book Geralt would actually prefer to go on missions that Foltest the King has ordered him to do, rather than just live a life with person he liked. And generally, I'm peeved by the fact that essentially what CD Projekt Red did is they gave you a choice in The Witcher 1, and then they said, no, fuck you, the choice was actually wrong. The right answer was Triss Merigold, and fuck you again. I don't like it. Dandelion. It is always awkward to write about oneself, yet I cannot shirk this duty. It is an effort to preempt any accusation of in the effort to preempt any accusations of partiality, I shall set down the humblest of notes, relating only the best-known facts. Dandelion, in reality Viscount de Lithnove, though titles are unimportant, is a certified troubadour, a lecturer at Oxenford University, a persona known among society as a charmer, poet, dandy, and unparalleled lover. Almost anyone north of the Yaruga has heard of him, and those who have not are either boors or simpletons or both, as a result of which their opinions do not matter in the slightest. Dandelion played a significant part in the most important events of the era. He loved, fought, negotiated, and acquired immense knowledge, even that of the forbidden variety. His works are a testimony of the time, but it is his moving poetic tropes that have brought him true fame. The important thing in this story is that Dandelion was a friend to Geralt of Rivia, possibly his one true friend. He was Geralt's confidant, advisor, companion of misery, for it was impossible to experience good fortune in the Witcher's company. What Geralt did, Dandelion faithfully recounted, and no one should give credence to those who accuse this humble chronicler of confabulating. Discretion, a virtue I have always professed, obliges me to remain silent about the circumstances in which I, through the person of Vernon Roche, began working with the Temerian intelligence. Suffice it to say that there comes a moment in everyone's life, facing great events, they cannot remain indifferent, and so I could not stand aside as history took shape before my very eyes. My dedication to the cause brought me to Flotsam at the time. There, though, an unfortunate incident involving twins at the local brothel, a town guard, a dog, a cat, and an oil lamp, through an unfortunate incident involving twins at the local brothel, a town guard, a dog, a cat, and an oil lamp, I would end up at the scaffold in the town square, from which I barely escaped with my life. Now, this is obviously very outlandish, but also very in character for Dandelion. He literally says that he will only give the most objective assessment of himself, facts that are well known, and then literally calls himself the most unparalleled lover in the North, and says that everyone whose opinion counts knows him, and if someone doesn't know him, you shouldn't listen to him because his opinion doesn't matter. Like, that's classic Dandelion for you. Vernon Roche. There is a man like Vernon Roche in every monarch's retinue, brave and determined, ready to execute any command, and thoroughly hated at court. He knows that only allegiance and service to the king keeps him his position. Roche was the leader of the Blue Stripes, King Svoltest's special forces, renowned amongst other things for battling the Scoia'tael and quelling many a rebellious non-human community. It was under his command that the unit rose to fame. Vernon earned Foltest's favor and trust through his deeds. One word from the king, and he would jump headlong into fire, asking only how long he was to stay there and hold his ground. That's the kind of man Vernon Roche was at the time. Vernon proved to be perceptive when he refused to flatly believe Geralt's guilt. Too many things needed to be explained, and the Blue Stripes commander decided risking cooperation with the suspect to get his hands directly on Foltest's real killer. Thus he remained loyal to the king, even after his death. Continuing his private investigation, Vernon headed for the Temerian-Adernian border, where he expected to find the Kingslayer's whereabouts. Thanks to his very best informant, Roche knew that the man could have been hiding among the Scoia'tael located in the vicinity of Flotsam, a trading post. Thus way the royal hound, Vernon Roche, was on the hunt once more. The list of Vernon Roche's achievements and heroic deeds was almost as long as the list of atrocities and depravities he had allegedly committed along the way. It is a fact that, as scrollings on the wall of the University of Oxenford say, pacifying non-humans is like wallowing in mud. Everyone gets dirty, generally with blood. To put it mildly, Roche was irritated with Geralt's decision, and his trust in the Witcher did not grow. Boosie Lavalette. No more than a lad back then, Boosie already displayed the pride and obstinacy typical of the Lavalettes. Some, however, attributed those qualities to the fact that King Foltest was his father. Anaïs Lavalette, the daughter of the Baroness Marie-Louisa Lavalette, was a scant few summers old at the time. Rumors that King Foltest was her father gave beginning to many important events. Ves. The fair-haired Ves stood apart from the rest of Vernon Roche's unit, and not only in that she was the only woman in the elite formation of hardened cutthroats and swashbucklers, her girlish face and shapely body would stand out even if the uniform did not emphasize them, for there is something in soldier women that attracts a man's gaze, and Ves was no exception. The reader should not be misled by this description. One does not earn a Blue Stripe membership with good looks, but with skill, determination, and at times ruthlessness. Anyone disregarding Ves would pay dearly for misjudging this young woman. Because of her gender, Ves would sometimes receive assignments where her beauty was more important than her combat abilities and efficiency. Roche has used Ves as his trump card more than once. Ves had a steady hand and a sure eye, making her the best sharpshooter in the unit. Not many could match her in throwing knives either. Shillard Fitz Osterlane. Many northern kings appear in this story, rash and thoughtful, amorous and frigid, brave and cowardly. The reader should easily see that should their crowns be removed with a pitchfork, should their crowns be removed and a pitchfork, a sword, or a bunch of bills, or a goat's apple given in the scepter's stead, they would be as human as we are. The same, however, cannot be said of the Emperor of Nilfgaard, the white flame dancing on the barrows of his enemies, whose shadow fell over the events I have written down. In this case, the shadow was represented by Shillard Fitz Osterlin, a consummate diplomat who has started more than one war, only to end it by accepting homage from the defeated. Arian Lavalette. Baroness Lavalette's eldest child, Arian, was beyond all doubt her and the old baron's son. Raised to be a knight, he sought to uphold the virtues of the state, valuing courage and valor, and striving with his every deed to embody them. He must have felt extreme discomfort by the conflict that engulfed him, as at its roots lay his mother's and family honor, pitted against widely discussed rumors of a love affair between the Baroness and King Foltest. Though the situation was dire, the young knight valiantly commanded the defense of his family castle, intending not to give an inch of ground. Seeing that further resistance was hopeless, Arian yielded, laying down his arms and placing himself at the king's mercy. Fate seeks forever to amuse itself, and towards this purpose it likes to play tricks. It brought the former foes together once again as they both fled the dungeons between the Lavalettes' vast family abode. Honor prevented the proud youth from fleeing his family seat while it was in the enemy hands. Arian made a decision that meant certain death for himself, but he nevertheless made it without hesitation, sealing with his sacrifice the bloodiest chapter ever in the Lavalette family annals. The Kingslayer. Disguised as a blind monk, the mysterious assassin took Geralt by surprise. Displaying immense self-control and lightning reflexes, not to mention a talent for acting, he murdered the king before the Witcher's very eyes. He then leapt out of the windows of the solar before Geralt could grab him. Surviving the fall unharmed, the assassin fled with the aid of some Scoia'tael. The information in Veron Roche's possession served to confirm what Geralt had witnessed. A man matching the Kingslayer description had been seen in the company of the Scoia'tael near the trading post of Flotsam. Finding him seemed like the Witcher's only chance. The mysterious individual now had a name. It appeared to be Leto, whoever he might be, and he was playing his own game, one in which the Scoia'tael had become an impediment. Yet his ultimate objective remained a mystery to Geralt. Leto had indeed been working with the squirrels, doing their wet work for them. Geralt would soon learn the answers to many more questions. In the ruins of the Elven Bath, Geralt and the mysterious assassin stood eye to eye a second time. Geralt was surprised by what he learned. Leto of Gulet had been a witcher. What is more, there were other Kingslayers, and they and Leto had worked together to assassinate the two dead northern monarchs. The Witcher and the assassin were no strangers. In fact, Geralt had once saved Leto's life. Their discussion ended abruptly as arrows whistled through the air and swords clashed. Leto demonstrated strength and skills in beating Geralt black and blue. Before leaving, he announced that he was on his way to Aedirn. The Kingslayer proved true to his word and kidnapped Triss, wounding Cedric mortally in the process. He forced the sorcerers to aid him by teleporting them both to Aedirn. Demavend. Demavend, son of Virfoiril, ruled the kingdom of Aedirn, which was mightily aggrieved during the last war with Nilfgaard. A proponent of the authoritarian rule, he was seen as having no love for non-humans. He moved more radically against the Scoia'tael, though he ruled in spite of himself. When the guerrillas perpetrated massacres on his own people, as these justified the punitive expeditions he delighted in sending into the foothills of Dol Blatana. He also showed no shyness towards imprisoning or torturing rabble-rousers and street prophets who would interfere in his politics. Thus it is no wonder that many could not wait to see him dead. In spite of this, his subjects could not help but be surprised by his death, for it is not every day that a crowned head paints the palace floor with its blood. Yorveth. They say all elves are beautiful, that they are born thus. In Yorveth's case, someone set out to change this, marking his face with an ugly scar that the elf partially hid between his crimson headscarf. Yorveth was a living legend, an elusive leader of a Scoia'tael unit, whose members gave no thought to laying down their arms and continued their war against humans. Stories of his deeds, of his deep hatred of the One, painted him as more akin to a vengeful ghost than an individual made of blood, bone, and flesh. Certain sources claim that Yorveth was the Kingslayer's ally, and thus involved in recent events, yet Geralt's first meeting with the elf brought few answers and ended with the Scoia'tael archers laying down a deadly barrage. Indeed, it seemed that at the time that the elf would only ever answer the Witcher with arrows. In the eyes of some people, like Loredo or Roche, Yorveth was a common criminal, his hands stained by the blood of the innocent. Indeed, the list of those he had cut down in his fight for freedom could easily rival the number of ballads, romances, and ditties in my repertoire. The elf was certainly a dangerous individual. He was not, however, a bloodthirsty monster. Ever cautious and aware of the game he was playing, he jumped at the chance of testing Leto's loyalty, becoming Geralt's ally at least temporarily. Fighting side by side certainly helps dispel distrust. The Witcher kept his word, which Jorveth appreciated, and the path to further cooperation stood open. Now, Jorveth is a bit of a weird character, because in some ways, in his sort of initial concept, he seems kind of like a carbon copy of Isengrim Faoil Tiarna, because literally this first sentence, they say all elves are born beautiful. It's from the books describing Isengrim Faoil Tiarna, who also had like a horrible scars on his face that like marred his natural beauty, and was also a legendary elven commander. So, you know, that's a weird thing to like repeat wholesale. But I do think Jorveth, once you get to know him better, sort of develops into quite an interesting character. And even now, with what he told you about him wanting to crown some woman in Aedirn, ostensibly a human, as a king, or rather, I guess a queen, although, you know, there have been, funnily enough, in the history of Poland specifically, women that have been crowned as kings, because of the peculiarities of like how the Polish laws of succession were worded. But he, you know, wants to help create a state that ostensibly is supposed to guarantee equal rights for all of the races, and he doesn't want that power for himself, but rather for someone else. I think that's pretty interesting. Zoltan Chivay, the dwarf Zoltan Chivay, is a close friend of Geralt's and mine. Met while we were sneaking through the forests and the wilderness of Bruges and Sodden, when war raged all around and the hoofs of the Nilfgaardian cavalry thundered on the high roads. Like many of his kin, he later fought at Brenna in the Mahakam Volunteer Detachment, a unit that contributed greatly to victory, although this is sadly ignored by most chroniclers. After the war, he wanted to start a business and even thought about taking a wife, yet fate has arranged it a bit differently. Zoltan has proved his friendship to the Witcher many times, eagerly standing in his side at a moment of need, disproving those who claim that each and every dwarf is a spiteful, aggressive son of a bitch, that they do not care for human plight, and that coexistence is impossible. I know many non-humans, and if anything stands in the way of coexistence, it is human ignorance, spite, and ungratefulness. To say that a dwarf would get himself hanged for a friend, they say that a dwarf would get himself hanged for a friend, but Zoltan was in my company on the scaffold for another reason. The local authorities had accused him of colluding with the Scoia'tael, and that is usually enough to earn one the main role in the entertainment, like a morning execution. The charges that Zoltan had contacts with the Scoia'tael were not entirely baseless. Though he did not actively participate in military action, the dwarf knew the unit's leader, Jorveth, among others. It was not surprising, really, that having encountered the aforementioned human spite and ungratefulness at every step, Zoltan sympathized with the dwarven and elven freedom fighters. He was balanced in his views, however, and valued loyalty to his friends above all else. Bernard Loredo. At the time of this story, Bernard Loredo was a commandant of the town watch of the river port and trading post of Flotsam. He was well suited to the position, amply demonstrating that through his brutal and heavy-handed approach to enforcing the law and justice. He was well suited to the position, amply demonstrating this through his brutal and heavy-handed approach to enforcing the law and meting out justice in the town. This boorish veteran of the Temerian army was perfectly happy with his posting to the backwoods, as he turned the borderland settlement into a private fiefdom which he ruled through fear and might, passing and executing judgment at whim. I was exceptionally lucky to escape the noose back then. Despite my deepest desire to the contrary, it would not be the last time we saw Bernard Loredo. In spite of maintaining a smokescreen of law and order in Flotsam, Loredo was as benevolent to non-humans as Emperor Emir was to the proponents of democracy. Given the slightest excuse, Bernard would gladly rid the trading post and its environs of all who were not human, using any means available. Much evidence suggested that Loredo was profiting heftily from his position through extortion, unlawful confiscation of goods, and brazen bribe-taking. He would enlist local goons to beat and intimidate all who were uncooperative, and this was very much the order of the day. Loredo yearned for some spectacular success in his fight against the Scoia'tael. Though his prison barge was overcrowded already, capturing Yorveth remained his deepest desire. John Natalis. It seems that every other person you meet took part in the last war against Nilfgaard. Such are the times in which we live. Yet we best remember those who made their mark in the annals of the conflict. John Natalis, the Constable of Temeria, is one such person. Supreme commander of the cumulative forces of the North at the Battle of Brenna, Natalis fought valiantly, commanded wisely, and contributed vastly to the victory, despite being outnumbered by the enemy 2-1. And he did not rest on his laurels after the battle. Instead, he pursued his foe, routing him Necnuntius Clandis, or nearly so, leaving but a few stragglers to flee beyond the Yaruga. John Natalis was honored richly for his deeds, and a square in Vizima now bears his name. After Foltest's death, Natalis temporarily served as a regent of Temeria. I have no idea what that means. Obviously, that's Latin. I am going to look it up just for, curiosity's sake. Maybe I'll remember something. So I'm going to post it in the description. Sheila de Tankerville. I know from experience that magicians are not above lusting for power. Among sorceresses alone, there are many whose ambition leads them to pull strings, moving kings and other mighty forces of the world, to command the elements in spectacular fashion, summon genies, bend fate, dictate royal proclamations, or to at least force others to eat chicken with cutlery. That is why magicians such as Sheila de Tankerville, known as the Koviri Loner, stood apart from the others. Lady Sheila was not known to interfere in politics, at least not visibly, instead dedicating her days to research. Strict, calm, and collected, unlike other sorceresses, she did not display her feminine charms. I beg to differ with the depth of this cleavage. Nor did she flirt with men, jiggling her posterior before them at every occasion. Though I must remain true to myself here, the world would be undeniably a much poorer place without a typical sorceress. The reason for Sheila de Tankerville's presence in the backwater town like Flotsam was initially a mystery, yet it quickly became clear that she had come there because of the Chiron, the river monster. For sorcerers gladly use the organs of exotic creatures as ingredients for magical preparations, and Sheila was no exception. Sheila's presence also turned out to be a lucrative opportunity for Zoltan, however odd that might sound. The dwarf cut gems for her in her magical apparatus. It appears that Sheila had very specific plans concerning King Hensel of Kedven and his attempts to father an heir. From what I have been able to tell, the meddling of Sheila and the other sorceresses in the world of politics was further reaching than anyone had imagined. Serit. Sometimes a person's name sinks into memory and brings fear to one's heart at first mention. Who was this mysterious Serit? What goals drove him, and what role would he play? Geralt had yet to learn all of this. Oaks. When I first heard Oak's name, the Witcher had no idea who he was. He did not have the slightest inkling of the role this individual would play in our story. Henselt. The Witcher once said that in his life He had met thieves who resembled city councillors, councillors who were like begging louts, harlots who behaved like princesses, princesses who smelled like pregnant cows, and kings who looked like thieves. King Hansel did not exactly look like a thief, but with all due respect, he was not far off. He owed his resemblance only partly to his bearded countenance, beady eyes, and a wandering yet penetrating gaze. His annexation of Lormark, called Upper Edirne by its natives, at a time when Edirne was fighting off the Nilfgaardian horde at its southern border, was considered a theft. The now dead king Demavend judged this deed so severely and communicated this in curt yet resonant words. Yet that was not the sole reason for King Hansel's reputation as an unpleasant person, much bolstered by the monarch's ambition and quarrels with his neighbors, and by many ruthless policies towards non-humans, whom he persecuted with a passion, squandering his realm's strength and funds. The aging Henselt did not have a living heir, and the rumor was that he had found producing another son somewhat troublesome. Philippa Eilhart. This was hardly the first time Geralt and I encountered Philippa Eilhart, the jewel of the court at Tretogor, and once a trusted sorceress of King Vizimir II. Philippa was one of the most talented mages of these times. Only a handful ever mastered the art of polymorphy. Her intellect and the influence she held at the Redanian court were not to be underestimated. Proud, independent, and extremely beautiful, as graceful in a fanciful yet elegant dress as in men's traveling outfit, she was beyond any doubt one of the most attractive women I have ever known. Yet I would not count Philippa among the most pleasant of females, despite her indisputable though chilly charm. Her gaze alone was enough to make even the most confident men shudder, and the mere thought of spending a night with her would make their flesh creep. Secondary character, New Boy. This soldier had acquired an allegedly miraculous amulet and truly believed its power would protect him from any and all harm. Recognizing that the pendant was useless, Geralt informed New Boy of this fact. Grateful for the warning provided earlier, New Boy not only believed Geralt was innocent, but helped the Witcher to avoid the guards, and thus honesty proved to be the best policy, which is true sometimes, at least. Count Echeverry. Before he got entangled in the revolt against Foltest, Sir Echeverry was known for his valor and tenacity as a knight, proving both in more than one tournament, either mounted or on foot. Yet valiance and tenacity were not enough to survive a cut from a witcher's blade, and thus the brave Echeverry paid with his life for his ill-advised participation in the rebellion. Arthur Tales. Though he would not show it, meeting Tales was a great surprise to Geralt at the time. They met each other in the past, in rather unpleasant circumstances, and the knight had a scarred face as a reminder of that meeting. This time Tales got away cleanly, the Witcher having confined himself with a few acrid words. The Archpriest. The church dignitary, confident of his god's protection, greeted the intruders with harsh words, yet he succumbed to persuasion and revealed where the king would find his illegitimate offspring. Einar Gausel. In addition to being a well-informed bookseller, Einar Gausel was also an accomplished barber. In discovering this, Geralt learned of the only person in Flotsam who would be able to do anything about his hair. If Lobinden's non-humans had been an organized community, the dwarf Einar Gausel would be the closest thing to its leader. Though the Scoia'tael considered him a collaborator on Human Leash, Einar tried to represent the non-human minority in the best way he could, even if that meant mediating between its members and the commandant. Furthermore, he ran something akin to a bookshop. Given its location was a complete backwater, his selection of titles was quite impressive. Louis Merce was a typical example of a widespread bureaucratic nepotism. It was rumored that he outright fled Vizima after bringing some unsavory troubles down upon his head. His cousin Lorido then granted him a comfortable position in Flotsam, where Merce saw things as a second chance. Fioravanti. A truly enterprising man, the merchant Fioravanti had found a niche that produced for him a decent income. Though his specialization was extremely narrow, This was the key to his success, for the secret of commerce is to be exclusive provider of a certain category of goods or services. Thus, Fioravanti was still in business, despite his forced stopover in Flotsam. Gaspar. In Flotsam, Geralt bumped into a pair of strange scholars. The alchemist Gaspar was one of them. He and his colleague Farid tried to convince the Witcher to take part in a mysterious experiment on the Witcher physiology. The study would only yield results many years down the road. Cedric. For reasons that were not entirely clear, this wise and experienced elf has chosen to live among humans. He worked for the people of Flotsam as a lookout and trapper, and none had better knowledge of the surrounding forests. Whether it was the local plants and wildlife, or the dangers that lurked among the trees, Cedric was the local inhabitants' chief, and often the only source of information. Heroism sometimes exacts the highest of prices. When Triss's life was in danger, the elf did not hesitate to defend her and was wounded, mortally as it turned out. Thus Cedric died, though his sacrifice would not be in vain. Chorab was Lobinden's alderman. A simple man, he nevertheless blended his penchant for storytelling with a desire to teach and impart wisdom. His tales pertained to times long past, traditions worthy of preservation, and legends that had been all but forgotten. He cared for the community he led and represented, and any honest villager could count on his help. Sandler. In Lobinden's tanning and leatherworking, leatherworking was the trade of Sandler, a skillful and reliable artisan. He ran a small stall with goods of his own making, but also accepted commissions for specific products. In those hard times, he made ends meet by working hard with his own hands. Malena. Life was not easy for not-humans in Flotsam, and Malena was no exception. The elven woman was suspected of leading soldiers into scoia'tael ambushes, a charge that could easily send her to the scaffold. The elven woman was indeed luring soldiers into a trap. Her fate now was in Geralt's hands. Though the Witcher did not reveal her complicity in the murders, the elven woman could not trust him. This led her to repay him with betrayal, yet even then the Witcher did not stoop so low as to kill an unarmed woman, and simply drove Malena away. Aneska, the local herbalist in Lobinden, took care not to stand in any way. Though some people respect women who know much about herbs and folk medicine, others fear them. Skilled herbalists are often thought to be witches and suspected of sorcery, so they must remain mindful that human mistrust can quickly turn into hostility. The Troll of Flotsam. Like most of its kind, the troll lived near Flotsam and had built a stone bridge and demanded a toll from those crossing it. The folk of Lobinden quickly realized it was a preferable alternative to keeping the structure in good order themselves, so the troll's presence was not a problem for anyone. But believe it or not, the troll took to drinking like the most degenerate hobo, thus proving that alcoholism is not unique to the more developed races. A personal tragedy was behind the troll's drunkenness, the death of his wife. She has been killed by unknown assailants. Once the death of his beloved has been avenged, the troll pulled himself together, promising to rebuild the bridge and quit drinking. Rupert. Geralt first encountered Rupert near the ruins of the asylum beyond Flotsam. The Ederian medic claimed to have come to this area with his friend Gridley in search of rare herbs. However, it appeared that they had underestimated the dangers lurking both in the forest and in the ruins. Something was missing from his story, however. Rupert has been a medic in the field hospital during the war. He and his friend had committed a crime back then. Years later, the wraith of the Nilfgaardian soldier they had tortured to death summoned them to the scene of the crime to have its revenge. Crime begets punishment, and this was no different. Geralt had no desire to defend murderers, and Rupert and his friend got what they deserved. Gridley. Rupert's friend was in dire state, lost amidst the somber ruins in the wilderness forsaken by gods and humans alike. Geralt found him easily and learned more about him, including what had led him to take such risks. Gridley had been stationed in the area during the war. His unit had tortured an Nilfgaardian soldier to death, all in the name of finding treasure. Years later, the murdered man's wraith used its power to force Gridley and Rupert to return to the site of their crime. Gridley shared Rupert's fate and paid for his past crimes, for Geralt decided he would not stop the wraith from exacting revenge. Arnold, supposedly involved in commercial dealings with Bernard Loredo, this man was a frequent guest at the commandant's abode. I am not even sure I saw this guy, like, ever. Dimitri. Comparing Dimitri to a Zangwebari hyena would be an insult to the poor animal. Unlike the beast, this scoundrel fed not only on carrion, but also on human and non-human misfortune. It was thus that he gathered his blood money. Even mentioning Dimitri in this story elevates him far more than he deserves. Thus let us merely note that the Witcher took his life, and say nothing more of that son of a bitch. Margot, the proprietor of the brothel, was a hard-nosed businesswoman, yet she shepherded her flock of girls with almost motherly care. It turned out that Margot was a spy for Yorveth. She decided to use her connection to avenge her lover's death. Ciaran. Ciaran had served in Yorveth's unit as the Elven commander's adjutant. Captured and imprisoned on the prison barge by Loredo's men, his position was unenviable to say the least, yet he still demonstrated the pride and stubbornness so characteristic of the Enseed. Derae, the elven girl at the brothel in Flotsam, was the favorite of many clients and of Margot herself. Unfortunately, she was bestially murdered by the blood-drunk mob during the massacre. Elias. Squaretal units are made up chiefly of young, rash elves, who need not think twice before they take up arms to fight for non-human freedom. Elias was one such elf, and was considered one of the best warriors in Yorveth's unit to boot. Okay, so I have a monster tab as well. A dragon. Once dragons were commonplace and ruled the continent absolutely. Dragon fire was the bane of cities, and dragon appetite was a constant threat to the first colonizers. So sorcerers stood against those creatures, and witchers were created to fight them. Today dragons are nearly extinct. Sometimes forktails and splizzards can be seen, but compared to dragons, they are like stray cats to tigers. The beasts were exterminated by professional hunters, such as the famed Crinfrid Reavers. Alchemical components found in a dragon's body are among the most expensive on the market, and are in high demand among sorcerers. The beast's roasted tail is a real delicacy. Troll. According to legend, trolls are creatures born of earth, and their body is made of rock. They hate sunlight, which kills them by turning them into stone, so they only subsist at night. That's much for legends. And the reality? Well, the truth is always much more prosaic. The trolls are living creatures like me and you, and they prefer day to night, for they are so clumsy that they stumble on stones in the dark spilling vodka. Their skin is hard like stone, but beneath there are muscles and a heart that pumps blood. And since they bleed, they can be killed. Arahas. The arachnids are lone hunters. They patiently wait for their prey to kill it with one swift strike when it appears. The same is true for the Arahas, a huge creature that took a liking to the riverside forest, becoming its undisputed king. A ruler who does not tolerate other hunters on its territory, including witchers. Endregas are forest creatures that resemble arachnids. They are especially fond of food of floodplains, and as moisture and tall grass suits them. Longer than they are tall, they move on all fours and are extremely difficult to spot as they lie motionless awaiting their prey. Like Kikimors, Endregas are divided into castes, with warriors being the most numerous, guards being less common, and queens being a real rarity. Drowners. Sometimes a drowned man returns as a monster to haunt the living. Tormented with his death, he murders his victims. He prefers to draw them beneath the water's surface, tearing the drowning victim to shreds with his sharp claws, and eats them like a wet biscuit. Such creature is called a drowner. They are often found at the banks of the Pontar, since the huge river with regular shipping and riverside villages provides them with ample sustenance. Necker. Imagine a drowner that burrows tunnels, climbs trees, and is more vicious than usual, and when ambushing its prey, it does so with many of its kin. Now you have a good idea of what a necker is. These primitive creatures are the bane of the wilderness. The inhabitants of the forests fear them, and animals give their nests a wide berth. Neckers are social creatures, gathering in something akin to tribes, for they can only repel the attacks of stronger assailants en masse. Now, what is interesting to me about neckers is, isn't it borderline confirmed that they are sentient? Like, look, this guy is even wearing clothes. That's, that's a sign of, and he's specifically only wearing clothes on his crotch, which seems to imply sort of like a sense of modesty, So, and they have chieftains who supposedly give them orders. Like, those were literally called orders. So, shouldn't they be trying to get along with them somehow? Like, I presume they don't understand the common tongue, but still, people in reality did get along eventually, even when they, well, to be honest, they as often or more often did not. But what I mean is, sometimes they did get along, even when humans in reality discovered other humans who did not speak their language. They eventually developed a way to communicate and sort of come to some kind of an accord. Of course, just as often, or, probably more often, they just killed the other humans that they have found that they couldn't communicate with that well. So, maybe that's a lesson about the neckers. Wraiths. Wraiths are not, as some claim, a projection of the inner fear. They are visible, tangible, and dangerous on top of that. The priests teach us that people who die suddenly, leaving this vale of tears with important tasks left unfinished, become such ghosts. So wraiths have their own aims. Sometimes they are unaware of them, but more often they aim to achieve them, not caring for the living. Crafting. I am obviously not going to read any of that because that's hardly relevant. I'm just going to click on it so that it's sort of unclicked. A tutorial. I should probably maybe come back to some of this, but obviously not during playing. Glossary. The Wild Hunt. According to tradition and eyewitness accounts, the Wild Hunt abducts people, forcing them to join its mad gallopade on the sky. Its harvest is especially rich just before or during a great war, like a few years ago in Novigrad, when over. Wait, but I read that. I specifically read all of that, like, in a book. I think. Anyway, according to tradition and eyewitness accounts, the Wild Hunt abducts people, forcing them to join its mad gallopade on the sky. Its harvest is especially rich just before or during a great war, like a few years ago in Novigrad, when over 20 people went missing without a trace after the Wild Hunt passed. Some of the abductees managed to escape the cavalcade back into the world of the living, but the stories they tell were so extraordinary that they were always considered insane. One of the insane asylum's patients claims to have been abducted by the Wild Hunt and taken to a world where unicorns saunter about lush elven gardens. When he finally succeeded in escaping the Wild Hunt's grasp, he returned to this world, only to find that his children had aged and died, so many years had passed. Stories of the Wild Hunt do not appear in the Dwarven and Elven cultures. It's quite interesting, for the elder races must have faced the hunt long before the humans did. as it seems, the dwarves ignore everything on mutual terms, while the elves are mysteriously silent on that subject. According to the Nordlings, the Wild Hunt is a procession, or rather a cavalcade of skeletal horsemen. They rush across the sky on their bony remains of steeds. Clad in rusty remnants of armor, they wear jagged swords at their waists. Like comets, the Wild Hunt is an omen of war, which has been confirmed beyond all doubt. The spectral cavalcade ventures out in search of victims every several years, but its harvest was never as rich as just before the last war with Nilfgaard, when over 20 souls went missing in Novigrad alone after the hunt passed through. Curiously, elven and dwarven legends make not the slightest mention of the Wild Hunt. Witchers. Despite my long friendship with Geralt, I know little about the peculiar brotherhood or guild that despite my long friendship with Geralt, I know little more about this peculiar brotherhood or guild that the learned tomes provide. On top of that, I am obliged to discretion, so I shall write nothing more than necessary on the subject. Once as numerous as the beasts they fought, today the Witchers are seen as a relic of times long gone. The exact character of their training remains a mystery. It is known that it consists, among others, of the trials, processes that transform the organism using specific combination of secret herbs and infusions. Those who survive gain superhuman reflexes, speed of reaction, the ability to see in the dark, and many other traits that make them lethal foes. During the training, they learn swordplay and basics of magics known as signs. Armed with this set of abilities, the Witchers can effectively fulfill their objective, that is to protect humans from monsters inhabiting our world. Sorcerers. Sorcerer is a name customarily applied to male persons capable of commanding power. Though it is one of many terms of phrases, most of them highly unflattering, to have been used over the ages. The terms have ranged from the rather respectful title of a wise one to the somewhat less specific bloody son of a bitch, the plague take him. As for women of this persuasion, that is, sorceresses, they have been called everything from archmistress to a colloquial expression I will not repeat out of the regard for the language and the respect for the female gender. The command of the power that these mages possess sets them above mere mortals, which can be good or bad. From the dawn of time of history, history remembers mages as either pure intentioned and courageous heroes, or as rogues bereft of reverence and faith. Human memory tends to remember the latter for longer, which may be why the common folk hold most people of this profession in contempt. Melitele. Great Melitele is, among others, the patron of love, marriage, fertility, nature and abundance. Her cult came to be the blending of those beliefs. Many different races and cultures held about those aspects of life. Melitele's popularity never waned, and the phenomena is explained in various ways. I think the causes are prosaic myself. The cult of Melitele is predominantly a women cult, and the goddess is, among others, the protector of women in childbirth. As delivering woman has to scream, and apart from the usual yells and empty promises that she will never give herself to another mangy man again, the woman has to call for some deity for help, and Melitele fills the bill perfectly. Because women were delivering, deliver, and will be delivering, the goddess Melitele does not have to worry about lowering the number of her worshippers. Magic. The power that the sorcerers can command is commonly called magic. In the opinion of certain sorceresses I am acquaintance with, magic is chaos, an art and a science, a curse, blessing and progress. However poetic it may sound, it is hard to find a better simile. Everything depends on the person that uses the power, of course. Still, it is a fact that it can be used to achieve many things not possible to normal humans. The Witcher's signs are also a form of magic, but sorcerers look upon them with disdain, since they cannot be compared to the forces the sorcerers themselves command. Without magic, our world would certainly be less interesting, and many beautiful things would be forgotten. Dwarves are one of the elder races. stocky and bearded, with strongly built bodies and low voices. They are distinguished for their height, which is lower than human. Of simple and direct manners, they are sometimes seen as grumpy, unkind, and greedy. I have to stress that my own opinion of dwarves is by no means the latter part. I only cite it here to now it seems most of those are actually it seems they are a repeat of what I've read in the books. Like, for example, compare this. Dwarves are one of the elder races, excellent merchants, bankers, smiths, and armorers. Compare this to this. This is literally the same thing. So I'm pretty sure most of the things in the glossary I have actually already read while I was, reading the books connected with those things. Although those things might be new. No, this I have read. This I have read. This I have read. This too. So I think out of those, only those two are new. Francesca Findebar, though she does not appear in our story, the elf Francesca Findebar, known also as Enid and Glenna or the Daisy of the Valley, certainly deserves mention. After the coup on Tannet Island, during which she sided with the mages who had allied themselves with Nilfgaard, Francesca became Queen of Dol Blatana, the state of free elves created somewhat whimsically by Emperor Emir. And Enid is widely considered to be the most beautiful woman in the world. This pureblood Enseed with dark gold hair and penetrating azure eyes is also a powerful sorceress, possessing a tremendous command of the famed elven magic. Vizima. Lying where important trade routes converge, Temeria's capital sits picturesquely on the shore of the Lake Vizima in the valley of the Ismena River, a tributary of the Pontar. The city is divided into 4 teeming quarters, which are home to thousands and host travelers from all corners of the world. The royal palace and court are both found here, and the city boasts many markets, temples, forges, shops, banks, workshops, inns and brothels. Since our story does not concern Vizima directly, I will end my description here and urge those interested to consult other sources. Edirn. This realm is bordered by Kedwen to the north, Redania to the northwest, Temeria and the massif of the Mahakam Mountains to the west, and Lyria to the south. The Blue Mountains line its eastern frontier. Edirnian coat of arms is a golden-red chevron on a black field, and its capital is Vengerberg. Not long ago the country nearly disappeared when Nilfgaard occupied its southern territories, and its northern neighbor and supposed ally Kedwen treacherously annexed Upper Edirn. Though the invaders were defeated and Kedwen withdrew from Edirn's northern lands, the kingdom's fate still hangs by a thread. The country has been ravaged by peasant revolts, and its central government seems ever unsteady. Lormark or Upper Edirn. The part of Edirn that lies between the Pontar and Dyfne rivers is called Lormark or Upper Edirn, depending on the interested party's political persuasion. These lands have been disputed for ages, with Kedwen laying claim to them as well. During the last war with Nilfgaard, Edirn found itself in deep trouble, fighting an uneven battle to repel the onslaught of the Black Ones in the south. Seeing that its southern neighbor would ultimately bow to the invaders, Kedwen, Edirn's ostensible ally in that conflict, sent its armies into Lormark, annexing the region. Several days later, Margrave Mansfeld of Ard Cray and Marshal Menno Coehorn, commander-in-chief of the Nilfgaardian army, greeted each other on the bridge spanning the Dyfne River. They shook hands over the bleeding, tortured corpse of the kingdom of Edirn, sealing, let us not mince words, a criminal partitioning of the plundered lands. And even though Kedwen restored Lormark to Edirn after the war, its taking of the territory with Nilfgaardian support was one of the most disgraceful acts in history, though I venture to say it was probably not the only or the last act of its kind. Pontar Valley. If you have but a morsel of geographical knowledge, one glance at a map is enough to know why the Pontar Valley is strategically important. It is here that the borders of Temeria, Redania, Kedwen and Edirn meet. It is the valley that physically marks those frontiers. They say that he who controls the Pontar Valley controls the north, so it is no wonder that the cited realms have clashed here more than once. Blood has often mingled with the waters of the Pontar, though the reasons for this have varied. Wars waged by nobles in pursuit of political interests and merchants seeking privileges have been intermingled with riots and massacres, elven uprising, and the revolt of frontier barons. All these have been garnished with the occasional peasant rebellion, an event that forces the quarreling factions to unite and crush the plebeian mobs drunk on blood and carnage. As the reader will soon learn, this time the region would again bear witness to events both important and bloody. Dol Blatana. In the Elven tongue, Dol Blatana means the Valley of the Flowers. Anyone who sees this land with their own eyes would admit to the aptness of this poetic name. Once the southernmost province of the Kingdom of Edirn, it has become the sole and sovereign realm of the Free Elves, following the last war with Nilfgaard, when Emperor Emir var Emrys gave the elves these lands in return for their wartime service. Dol Blatana is ruled by the elven sorceress Francesca Findebar, known also as Enid Anglenna, the Daisy of the Valley. It remains a thorn in the side of its neighboring realms, even though its queen has been forced to distance herself officially from the guerrilla war waged by the Scoia'tael. Temeria. Anyone who wishes to be considered an educated man rather than a common boor should mention Temeria first when northern kingdoms are concerned. The realm's coat of arms is a black shield dotted with silver fleur-de-lis, and its capital is Vizima, where the royal palace elected by King Foltest stands. The country extends its protection to several surrounding domains, including the mountainous dwarven homeland of Mahakam. Currently, Temeria's neighbors include the mighty Redania, the wooded Kedwen, and Tsidaris, known for its truly pathetic poetry of Valdo Marx, a troubadour unworthy of the title, for he chiefly devotes himself to besmirching the work of other superior artists. The other two places in Temeria essential to our story, and thus must be mentioned. Firstly, north of Vizima, near the white bridge that links the banks of the Pontar, stands the proud fortress and the walled town of the Lavalette family. Secondly, further up the Pontar lies the small town and trading post of Flotsam. Both will prove important to the beginning of our story. Now, it's funny how Dandelion can't help himself but trash talk some other guy from another country just because that guy trash talks him. Even though it has nothing to do with this story. Redania. Situated between the Bra River in the north and the Pontar in the south, Redania is one of the north's most important kingdoms. Its coat of arms is a crowned silver eagle on a red field. The eagle grips a golden scepter in its talons, and a small black shield bearing a golden cross adorns its proudly protruding chest. Despite recent unrest, the country survived unscathed and intact. The crisis that followed the death of King Vizimir the Just, Tretogor, King Radovic's seat of power, is the country's capital, though the free city of Novigrad is the largest population center. In fact, Novigrad is something akin to the capital of the world, a center and cradle of commerce and culture, where enlightened men can breathe. Where an enlightened man can breathe his fill, as long as he does so away from the back alleys. Old, musty, and scholarly Oxenfurt, the home of the outer's alma mater, is another of the kingdom's noteworthy cities. During the last war with Nilfgaard, Redania joined with Temeria, Aedirn, Kedwin, and other northern realms to repel the invaders, and the Royal Redanian Corps played an important part in the Battle of Brenna. Kedwin. The formidable ranges of the Blue, Kestrel, and Fiery Mountains define the eastern and western boundaries of this densely forested, cold, and harsh domain of Kedwin, whose coat of arms is a black unicorn rearing on a golden field. The realm's capital at Ard Craig was the seat of power of King Henselt, a man known for having a violent temper and pursuing radical policies towards non-humans. The latter could be attributed to the fact that Scoia'tael units consistently caused great injury to the wooded land and its inhabitants, launching many brutal guerrilla attacks. The local human populace responded with massacres perpetrated on the assimilated elves and dwarves inhabiting the country's cities, and so hatred burned and blood bred blood. Those who called for peace were accused of treason and often died at the hand of their own kinfolk. Furthermore, Kedwin was involved in an age-old feud with the new neighboring Aedirn over the territory of Lormark, and that conflict cast a pall over the relation between the two countries. As you can clearly see, its echoes rang out in this story as well. Okay, and the final tab is Alchemy. Kiss increases resistance to special attacks that cause bleeding while producing no side effects of its own. Okay, so they don't have like lore description. It's just a description of how the potion works. Although, it seems some of them do. For example, this one does. Petri's Filter, the potion created by a student of the famous mage of the First Conclave, is weaker than Stammelford Filter, but it causes muscle numbness but still causes muscle numbness that decreases damage dealt with the sword. Petri's Filter increases the intensity of the Witcher's science, the impact of Ard, the defenses of Gwen, the effectiveness of Irden, and so on. Falka's Blood owes its name to King Vridang's daughter, a rebel known for her cruelty. So some of them kind of have like a little bit of a lore description, but mostly they don't. Like it's mostly just a description of how it works, which I don't care about that much. It's kind of self-explanatory and certainly not worth devoting additional time to reading in detail. Okay, so that concludes the reading of the journal for this part of the game. So normal gameplay will resume from the next one. For now, that's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.